A few months ago, I made a video talking about how I was worried for Sonic Frontiers. With all that was shown in that awful IGN gameplay, I was really worried about the state of the game. Sure, updated builds were presented later down the line, but they mainly showcased polish. Sonic was still running around, letting a bunch of springs, rails, boosters, and ramps influence him. I was worried Frontiers was just going to be a super automated 3D Sonic game under an open world guise. Now that I've played through it though, I'm happy to say that wasn't entirely the case. Let's get started. The game begins with Eggman investigating some ancient structure. After slapping some hacking device onto it, it powers up, robotic creatures emerge from the ground, and Eggman is sucked into the structure. We then cut to Sonic, Tails, and Amy headed to the Starfall Islands in search of the Chaos Emeralds. A rift opens up, they're sucked in, and you're abruptly thrown into gameplay. No, we were not just thrown into Sonic Forces, don't panic. Endure this level, wait for the PS5 to finish downloading the latest patch, I guess, and you'll end up back in the real world. Now Sonic must find the Chaos Emeralds as well as his missing friends. Go through some tutorialization, and the rest of the island will open up for you. Now the open world adventure truly begins. The first of the friends we find is Amy, who's initially locked up in some spiny capsule. After providing enough of these heart crystals, she's freed. Well, not entirely. Although she's out of the capsule, she's in this weird middle ground between the real world and cyberspace, which is what that rift sucked us into. She can walk on solid ground, but is still intangible to certain things, which I guess makes sense. There's a surprising amount of content in this game, so there's quite a bit to talk about. I think I'll start off with those heart crystals I previously mentioned. These are memory tokens, rewards for completing numerous obstacle courses scattered throughout the island. These obstacle courses are mostly made up of boosters, springs, rails, and other mechanisms from previous 3D Sonics. I was disappointed when I saw them in pre-release footage, and I still am. It's just automation. It's bad. What's the challenge in getting pushed by some boosters into some springs that launch you into some hoops? The answer is, there is no challenge. Take this particular obstacle course. It has these buttons that spawn platforms after pressing them. The end of it has Sonic run through several boosters against the player's will, subsequently pressing buttons placed between them. What was the point of that? If I was going to press all those buttons automatically, why even have them? Why not just have the platform you spawned in there to begin with? While I'm on this rant, why do there have to be 5 boosters lined up like this? Does one not suffice? Why not just get rid of it and let the player run to the ramp on their own? Why does this spring launch me into a spring that sends me down to another spring that just sends me back to where I was? Why couldn't the first spring have just sent me to the upper platform? Better yet, why couldn't they have just gotten rid of the 3 springs to let the player realize they actually have to make the jump themselves? Why is there a booster panel right in front of this rail when it already has a rail booster? Why have springs here if I could easily make these jumps myself? I could easily rant more about the numerous oddities in these obstacle courses, but that would probably add an extra half hour to the video. So let's move on. Sometimes you're expected to do more, like jumping between rails or chaining some homing attacks, but overall, there's very minimal interaction in these obstacle courses aside from just holding forward on the analog stick. I guess they're cool to run through though. What's neat about them is they're placed in such a way that, once you're done with them, you're usually launched into another point of interest, like a puzzle or even another obstacle course. So they do work well for guidance. They just feel so out of place though. Seeing a bunch of floating junk in the sky when panning the camera up is really jarring. Look at the promotional art. Look how clean it is. They didn't put any floating platforms or rails in it because they knew it would have looked stupid. Anyway, after playing enough, I got used to these obstacle courses, but the thought of them being super automated always lingered in the back of my head. It's not good level design, but there's nothing we can do about it now. Once Amy is freed, you have to keep collecting memory tokens to activate more cutscenes with her to progress the story. Movement in this game is surprisingly decent. I originally wanted Sonic to be a little heavier, like 2D Sonic. In those games, the physics complemented the level design. It's what made the games fun and interesting, and Sonic more appealing than Mario at the time. It was shown Sonic wasn't going to be this way before release, and it was disappointing, but it's alright. The movement here works well, and I'm satisfied with it. Of course, I still stand by the fact that 2D Sonic physics in a 3D Sonic game would be great. If they did that for this game, I think there wouldn't have been so much automation in the obstacle courses. The developers would likely have designed them with Sonic's physics in mind, relying less on springs and boosters and more on terrain and Sonic's interaction with it. Take this instance for example. There was an obstacle course above me, and I was too stubborn to find where it started. So, I used my momentum and a slight incline on the terrain to launch myself high enough to lock onto the enemy on top of the platform, skipping whatever I actually had to do to get up there. That was a cool moment. If Sonic were heavily momentum-based, there could have been more instances like that, except they'd be less finicky because that's how you would be expected to complete the obstacle courses. On top of just your normal running speed, you also have the ability to boost. Yes, the boost mechanic is still here, but not exactly. Previous 3D Sonics had that incredibly fast boost that made you an invincible streak of death that destroyed everything in its path, but here, it's way more toned down. Not only is it not ridiculously fast, but you can actually turn properly during it, and you aren't invincible. It's just a sprint accompanied by a stamina wheel, like Link's in Breath of the Wild. If you max out your rings, Sonic will go into an electrified state, and his boost will be powered up. You'll go way faster, but you're still not invincible. It's a cool bonus for preserving a high ring count. Aside from the boost mechanic, the drop dash is also here. Why? I have no idea. It serves absolutely no purpose, just like the Super Peel-Out in Sonic Lost World. I guess it's just here for nostalgia, just like the Super Peel-Out in Sonic Lost World. There are numerous enemies on these islands for Sonic to encounter, so of course, there's combat. Surprisingly, it's not that bad. It's mindless, but engaging. You have the standard homing attack, some punches and kicks, but you also have a skill tree to unlock new moves. To be honest, I didn't really care much for these. I'd unlock the moves, maybe do them occasionally when fighting enemies, but I'd usually forget what particular button combination was needed to execute them. If anything, I'd accidentally execute these attacks when mindlessly mashing buttons during combat. Sure, these special moves do a decent bit of damage, but when it comes down to it, punches and kicks are really all you need. Considering the skill tree is an optional feature you don't have to progress, of course the default attacks are enough. These extra moves are just here to spice up combat and make it look stylish, and there's nothing wrong with that. There is one particular special move I actually use consistently, and that's the Sonic Boom. It's the best move in the skill tree. Hold the appropriate button down during a combo, and Sonic will send out a flurry of projectiles to the enemy. Not only is it one of the coolest looking attacks, but it pretty much trivializes minor fights. Those weird ball enemies that take forever to kill because of the numerous orbs protecting its weak point? Trivial. Just use the Sonic Boom, and they're dead. They literally just stand there and let you kill them. I make it sound like it was unintentional though. It's obvious that specific enemy was designed with the Sonic Boom in mind. There are also these 3 special skills to the right of the skill tree, which only unlock as the story progresses. The first one, Grand Slam, unlocks after freeing Amy. I bring this up because it's fairly integral to the combat. Sonic has the ability to parry, and Grand Slam gives you the option of counterattacking after successfully doing so. The parry itself is pathetically easy to pull off. At first, I thought it was based on timing, but you can actually just hold down the left and right bumpers, wait for an enemy to hit you, and the parry successfully executes. Regardless, I still found myself doing it as if it were dependent on timing. I understand children fall under the target audience for this game, but come on, you can give them a little challenge. To actually unlock the skills within the skill tree, you need experience points, which are mainly earned through combat. There's also the air trick skill you can unlock, which acts as a more convenient source of experience. Get launched by certain springs, ramps, and hoops, flick the left analog stick a bunch, and Sonic will do tricks that grant him experience points. If you're going fast enough, you could potentially launch yourself off some random bit of terrain without needing any of those mechanisms. I'm pretty sure this interaction with the terrain was a bug, but the developers couldn't find a way to fix it, so they made it into a feature by having Sonic go into the air trick state to reward players for accidentally doing it. It's made even more apparent it's a bug when the game will suddenly decide to launch you in a completely unintended direction. You can unlock skills in the tree surprisingly quickly. Even after doing so, I still performed air tricks whenever possible because the game conditioned me to flick the left stick like a maniac anytime those blue sparkles showed up around Sonic. The ground pound also makes a return, but I didn't use it much for combat. I mainly just used it to get back to ground faster. Another addition to Sonic's arsenal is the Psy Loop. This was definitely one of the first mechanics the designers came up with for this game, not just because it's the first skill on the skill tree that you're forced to unlock during the tutorial, but because it's used for pretty much everything. Lit torches? Psy Loop them. Floating shards of light? Psy Loop them. Weird pedestals that could hold a ball? Psy Loop them. If you're stuck on something, just use the Psy Loop. Look here. I remember seeing this structure in the IGN gameplay and being really bothered by it. Just what the hell was it supposed to be? Well, I jump onto this platform, wall run onto this isolated slate, and now I'm stuck. I can't make it to the rest of the wall above me. I just assumed I'd have to gain enough speed to reach the rest of the floating wall, but it didn't seem possible. Through a combination of ground pounding and double jumping, I was able to gain just enough height to boost into the wall, which registered as a collision, allowing me to run up it. What you were actually supposed to do is use the Psyloop on the platform at the bottom, which magically gives it the power to shoot out from the ground. It just didn't look like something you could Psyloop. But in that moment, the main rule of Sonic Frontiers was etched into my brain for the remainder of the game. If you're stuck, just use the Psyloop. You can also use the Psyloop in combat. It's basically a way to stun enemies or reveal a weak point. There's also a quick Psyloop available in the skill tree. As the name implies, it quickly performs a Psyloop on an enemy during a combo, making it so you don't have to awkwardly run around to manually create a loop. It can only ensnare the one enemy you're hitting, so it's not too useful if you want to ensnare a group. Speaking of enemies, they're kind of lame. Sonic Frontiers takes place across multiple islands, and each one has a unique enemy roster. I'm specifically talking about the minor enemies. Let's start with those grunts that are always in groups. They're incredibly pathetic on Kronos Island. Just hit them with the homing attack and they're dead. They'll never hit you unless you stand still. In later islands, they'll have more tricks up their sleeves, like in Ares Island for instance. Instead of fighting you, they like to shield themselves with these barriers. It's a little annoying. It breaks the flow of combat. Now you have to wait for them to drop their barriers. Using the Psyloop does get them out of it though. Back to Kronos Island, we also have those ball enemies I previously mentioned. They're surrounded by a bunch of orbs you have to whack off. If you don't get away in time, they can zap you. Get rid of all the orbs surrounding the enemy, hit its head, and it's dead. There are also these shielded guys, which I think are the lamest enemies on the island. They just stay in their little shield, only occasionally turning it into a spinning disc of death to hit you, but that's it. It's incredibly easy to avoid their projectile, and throwing it leaves them vulnerable. We also have these red spinning tops. After one hit, they go into this self-destruct mode and chase you down in an attempt to catch you in the eventual explosion. Those were just the regular minor enemies. On top of those guys, we also have mini-bosses. These guys are unique to each island, and they all have their own gimmick. Kronos Island has ninjas, towers, squids, and asuras. What the hell is an asura? Ninjas are standard, close quarters fights. Basically a single tougher version of those grunts. There's not much to say about them. Towers are these large pillars you have to chop down to reach their head. If they give you an opening though, you can run along them to easily reach their weak point. Squids turn this game into Sonic Run, you know, the mobile app, where you run on this path it produces and shift between 3 lanes, avoiding occasional energy blasts. Squids are cool, but such a slog to fight. Not only does it take a while to reach them when running on their path, but they'll also form these specific paths that force the game into an automated state, prolonging the fight even more. They do it pretty frequently too. Sure, it looks cool, I guess, but it's just annoying. The path is also really reflective. During one particular fight with a squid during the day, the path got so shiny I couldn't even see the projectiles the squid was shooting, and got hit as a result. When you do eventually reach the squid, it creates a more traditional arena so you can actually attack it. Asuras are these giant robots you have to run up to reach their weak points. When they slam an arm down, these blue rings appear along it, and going through them will guide you to their top. As the fight progresses, red rings will show up to push you back. Out of all the mini-bosses in this game, Asura is my favorite. Huge towering entity that isn't even a major boss, cool way of reaching their weak point, and that music, so serious and foreboding. I love it. Unfortunately, Asura is one of the more awkward fights. You're expected to run up their arms, but you can also climb their bodies, which doesn't seem right. Also, when you destroy one of their arms, you get knocked back as if you took damage. It's a small detail that really bothers me. I did something successfully, but it's like the game denies my success by making Sonic fly back like that. Getting boosted up by those blue rings is also kind of buggy at times. Here, I got launched at an awkward angle and wasn't close enough to get a homing attack. I was also stopped in my tracks for seemingly no reason just before that. After one arm is destroyed, Asura's remaining weak points are surrounded by these laser barriers. They're so useless though. They only surround the bottom of the weak point, but the homing attack reticle focuses at its top, so this little defense mechanism almost never harms you. I like how they have that little opening in the lasers, like the designers intended players to walk through it. Your main method of reaching these weak points is launching yourself off the Asura's arms and homing attacking from above, so you'll be over these lasers pretty much the entire time, never needing to walk through them. I think this is a good place to mention this. If you execute the Sonic Boom skill, you can actually do it indefinitely as long as you keep the trigger held and never get hit. It was funny doing it on an Asura, because once you've locked onto one of its weak points, it can't reach you. So, if you just keep doing the Sonic Boom, the Asura just patiently waits for you to finish so it can explode. Overall, the mini-bosses have their flaws, but I think they're a cool addition to the game. Defeating them will reward you with the portal gear. I'll get into what they're used for later. I do wish there was a particle effect for when the gears spawn. They just awkwardly pop into existence. There are numerous challenges littered throughout the islands, indicated by these signposts. Now, before I get into them, I have to talk about these signposts. They were present in pre-release footage, and I'm stunned they're still here. They look like placeholder assets. Sure, their minimalistic design makes them stand out, but it doesn't look good. It's out of place, even with the whole digital cyber theming. Could they really not come up with a better asset? These signposts are also used to indicate spots you can Psyloop to unearth collectibles. They didn't even need the asset for these. There's a glow emanating from the ground beneath the sign, and that's really all you need. You're already conditioned to Psyloop anything that seems suspicious, so removing the signpost wouldn't make these spots any less conspicuous. Anyway, back to the challenges. Actually, I shouldn't say challenges. I should say tasks. There's nothing really challenging about them. They range from walking along a path of tiles in the correct order, dodging left and right onto glowing tiles, running from one point to another under a certain amount of time, Psylooping stuff, and so on. More variety shows up in the later islands, but that doesn't necessarily mean more engaging. There are also these challenges that can only be done at night, which is dumb. Why have a restriction like this? I get it's to force you to do something else in the meantime, but they were sometimes the only tasks I had left to complete because I kept putting them off. They didn't have any daytime-only challenges, so this felt unnecessary. The worst challenges by far are these hamster wheels. Wanna know how to complete these? Just run! Yup, it's as simple as that. Just run. They knew it was such a ridiculous challenge, they couldn't help but put a just in that message prompt. Completing challenges reveals portions of the map. It's initially obscured by these grid squares, and completing the challenges will remove them, but it doesn't really clear out a nice chunk around the location of the challenge as you'd expect. If I'm here, why did the squares all the way there get cleared, but not the one the challenge is literally in? Challenges also spawn these white rails when completed. They act as a more streamlined way of traveling to previously explored parts of the island. I never really used them. Why take these boring rails to other sections of the island when it's more engaging to run there normally? They're really only useful in the third island, where it's fairly fragmented and the white rails make traveling between chunks more tolerable. Completing every challenge on an island unlocks fast travel between the many cyberspace portals littered throughout said island. More on these portals later. Also, completing challenges grants you either a red seed of power or a blue seed of defense. These can be used to level up your attack and defense, respectively. To actually use these items, you have to take them to the Hermit Coco. This guy will immediately grant you the appropriate levels depending on the number of seeds you give him. On top of that, he can also change your ring count and speed levels by taking some from the other. But how do we actually level those stats up? Well, that's the job of the Elder Coco, who you likely meet first. By giving the Elder Coco these other smaller Coco littered throughout the island, he will level up your speed and ring count. One of the most annoying things about this game is this interaction. For some reason, you can only level up a stat one level at a time. He asks what you want to level up, you choose, he grants you the level, asks if you want more, you choose again, and it repeats until you've exhausted all the Coco you returned. It's ridiculous. Why the hell did they do this when the Hermit Coco had a way better system? If they really needed you to individually choose what you wanted to level up, it should have just been one of these. On the topic of UI, one minor thing I do want to mention is the icon they used for attack power. It's a sword. Why? It gets the point across, sure, but it's thematically inappropriate. Sonic isn't known for attacking with a sword, so this just comes off as lazy. If they have his shoe depict speed, why didn't they go with the glove making a fist for attack? Hell, they already had a fist drawn out in the Phantom Rush icon, why not isolate it and use that? They also got lazy with introducing the Coco. As you're leaving the tutorial area, you run into some, and a tutorial prompt tells you what they are, what they do, and who to give them to. Wouldn't it have been better to just have the player collect them without knowing what they do, then eventually bump into the Elder Coco later and have him tell you everything? He already does tell you what he can do in exchange for Coco, so the prompt wasn't necessary, especially the other one that pops up just as you approach him. Side note, the Elder Coco is adorable! Just look at him! If they ever make a plush of this guy, I'm getting it immediately. Anyway, the collectible Coco are littered throughout the islands. They're usually in plain sight, but they sometimes blend in with their surroundings. They're easy to miss. To find them, I usually relied on the sounds they made. Quite a few tend to hang out on top of these triangular houses, and I think that's bad. Sonic's interaction with these sloped structures is weird. Sometimes you slide off them, and sometimes you don't. I guess you need a certain amount of speed so you don't slide, which makes sense, but it's really inconsistent. The Coco are usually on these protrusions on top of the houses. Reaching them is quite easy, but they're on such narrow platforms, it's really awkward. The climbing of the structure, the placement of the Coco, it just seems like I shouldn't have been able to get on top of these houses to begin with, and I somehow glitched my way through it all. Just look how finicky this is. Why is this an intended thing the developers expected you to do? Although there are quite a few things littered throughout these islands, they tend to feel a bit empty at times. It's not too bad. Sonic is fast, so of course there's a decent bit of space between points of interest, but even when there is something in a particular spot, it still feels lacking. It's hard to explain. Maybe it has something to do with the unfulfilling nature of the obstacle courses and challenges. They're fairly mediocre, so maybe it wouldn't make much of a difference if they were not there to begin with. Enemies are the same way. It's like the designers added all the environmental stuff, obstacle courses, and challenges to the map, then looked for pockets that felt a little too empty and placed enemies in those spots. That's not to say all enemies were placed that way. Take the tower mini-boss at the center of that web-like structure. That guy is technically guarding the floating structure above it, preventing you from getting the Chaos Emerald at the top. I feel they could have done stuff like that more often, especially with the standard enemies. After exploring a bit, Sonic will eventually encounter this glitchy-looking girl who's been stalking him since he got here. This is Sage, the AI of Eggman's device we saw in the intro cutscene, except her contact with that cyberspace portal has personified her. She'll be accompanied by a gigantic robot. As Eggman's pawn, Sage of course wants you dead, and commands the robot to attack you. So, this robot, Giganto, was the guy we saw in the announcement trailer for this game. It was a really cool scene, dramatic but serious. The thought of Sonic having to fight such a towering enemy made me quite excited for the game. I'm sure others felt the same way too, because it's the most replayed part of the trailer. However, Giganto's introduction here was a little underwhelming, and it's not because he looks lamer in-game compared to the CGI trailer. It's mainly his actions during this altercation. Giganto's movements are quite swift here, even though he's huge. The strength and size of a giant is conveyed well through slow movements. Look at the fire giant in Elden Ring, or that one Noah fight from Astral Chain. It actually looks like these guys pack a punch. Giganto, on the other hand, doesn't. He's slow when walking and stomping, but when he grabs and throws Sonic, it's like Giganto completely forgot he was 30 stories tall. The throw doesn't kill Sonic or anything, but he's pretty much unscathed. He freaking shatters some stone pillars and crashes into the side of a mountain. There's not a scratch on him, and the most he does is pass out. This whole interaction just made Giganto seem less threatening, as such a powerful looking throw did pretty much nothing. Anyway, Giganto's too strong at the moment, and the only way you'll stand a chance is by getting all the Chaos Emeralds. How do we get them? Well, you can find some of them scattered throughout the island, contained within these vaults. You can't get them until you've collected enough vault keys, which are rewards for completing cyberspace levels. Oh boy, I get to talk about cyberspace levels now! The cyberspace levels are the worst part of Sonic Frontiers. Why? Because they're linear boost levels. I guess Sega couldn't just rely on the open world alone. They had to sprinkle in some linear boost levels to cater to the people that actually enjoy Boost Formula Sonic. First off, those portal gears I mentioned earlier are needed to access the cyberspace levels. Collect a couple of them, drop them off at these cyberspace portals, and you'll unlock the levels. Sonic controls fairly well in the open world, but he's so much worse in the cyberspace levels. Realistically, it's harder for an object traveling at high speeds to properly turn. That's not the case for Sonic though. In the open world, he can make incredibly sharp turns on a dime. Though jarring, it doesn't really detract from the experience. In the cyberspace levels, however, Sonic's turning is incredibly sluggish, even if he's barely running. I don't understand how they could make his control feel so bad here. I don't really die much in these levels, but when I do, it's because of said bad control. Look how I botched this attempt at getting a red ring. I had the left stick aimed in the direction of the red ring the entire time, and Sonic took way too long to turn. Sometimes you'll find yourself in 2D cyberspace levels, which are honestly worse than the 3D ones. Sonic feels much slower in them, especially since the boost mechanic doesn't seem to speed you up at all. Now, there is some enjoyment to be drawn from these levels. For example, I do find it satisfying to get S ranks on some, especially if I failed to do so on the first attempt. That's really it though. Theming is very limited. These are supposed to be based off Sonic's memories, which is why the levels are Green Hill, Chemical Plant, Sky Sanctuary, and I think City Escape, but that's it. It's bizarre to me that they only went with 4 stage themes. It would have been cool to see something like Water Palace from Sonic Rush, Rooftop Run from Unleashed, or even Aquarium Park from Colors. Hell, since some of these levels are mostly rail grinding, they could have used Rail Canyon from Heroes. I think I would have been more tolerant with more variety. Instead of saying, "Oh boy, another chemical plant, this level sucks," I'd probably say, "Oh my god, it's a somewhat obscure zone I recognize from an old Sonic game. This level sucks." As mentioned earlier, red rings are here, but they suck now. Collecting them isn't very rewarding. There were so many times I just got all 5 in one go on my first try. Branching paths do exist in these levels, but they aren't always utilized. So many of these red rings are just lazily placed on the main path, making them nearly impossible to miss. Take this level for instance. It ends with a ramp boosting you into the goal, and the final red ring is in that path you're forced into taking. They just give it to you for free, and they do this in quite a few levels too. It's probably more difficult to beat these levels without collecting any red rings. There's really no challenge in these cyberspace levels, nor any replay value. The only reason you'd play them more than once is to complete all the goals, and even those are too easy. Complete the level, impossible to fail, get an S rank, depends on the level, but usually pretty easy, collect a certain number of rings, no problem, get all the red rings, somehow easier to do than collecting regular rings. Completion of these goals rewards you with the vault keys needed to get the Chaos Emeralds. There are certain Psyloop spots that drop these keys, and enemies can occasionally drop them too, but they aren't the best source for them, so playing through some of the cyberspace levels is kind of a requirement. Once I completed all goals for a cyberspace level though, I never looked back. Aside from the locked up emeralds, there are a couple that can be acquired through story quests. As you progress through Amy's cutscenes, you'll eventually have to do some little mini-games involving the Coco. Completing them results in the remaining Chaos Emeralds just popping out of thin air, and Sonic doing a surprisingly gratifying victory dance after snatching it. Eventually, we get this flashback cutscene of these creatures with the Coco inside them. This was crazy. They looked like Chaos from Sonic Adventure. Were these his ancestors? After progressing the story and getting 6 of the emeralds, the final puzzle of the island is unlocked. This was the first actual challenge of the game for me. The mini-bosses, cyberspace levels, those had nothing on this puzzle. These pillars all shoot lasers in a particular direction. Aiming them at other pillars will reflect the beams a certain way. You have to align the beams with this dirt path drawn on the ground below. What makes it challenging is the fact that you can't just move one pillar in isolation. They influence each other. Essentially, you have to rotate some in a certain way so that when you rotate another that influences the one you just messed with, it ends up aiming in the desired direction. This took me several minutes to solve, and I am a little embarrassed to admit that, but hey, at least it wasn't a stupid slide puzzle. I swear, those things are impossible to solve. Once that's done, this big waterfall splits, allowing you to reach the upper level of the island. You could actually reach this waterfall earlier, there was nothing stopping you. However, there was collision preventing you from running under it. There were springs clearly visible within it, so I was a little confused as to why this was blocked off. This explained it, but I feel they should have just hidden the springs. Anyway, you take a bunch of springs to reach the top of the waterfall, this really awkward cutscene of Sonic boosting midair for way too long plays, and now you're on your way to confront Giganto. The final emerald is located on Giganto's head. Climb up the Titan, get the emerald, transform into Supersonic, and the fight begins. Before I get into the fight, let me talk about an awful thing that happened at this point in the game. If you don't have over 100 rings when initiating the fight, your ring count is set to 100. I managed to run out of rings and fail the fight twice. If you fail, you restart in the boss arena with 0 rings. I thought, oh dang, Giganto has quite a bit of health. I should probably go max out my rings then come back. However, the map menu wouldn't open. Looks like I was screwed and would just have to get good. I tried the fight again, got him to less than half health, but ran out of rings again. Could I really not go back to the main area to get more rings? That's what I thought, at first. When I pressed the map button this time, it did open. So, I had assumed the game just bugged out the first time I failed the fight. I fast travel back to the main area and immediately notice something's off. The island is eerily emptier than usual, and I can't seem to find any rings. Nothing was loaded. No rings, no cocoa, no springs, no boosters, nothing. Okay, so the game was glitched. Going back to Giganto should fix everything, right? Remember, everything was unloaded, so that included the springs we used to get to the top of the waterfall. I was in purgatory. There was no way out of this. Load the autosave? Not an option. The autosave was too recent. Close and reopen the game? Didn't work. Load your last manual save? Definitely an option, but I didn't want to resort to that. I had not saved for nearly 3 hours. I would have lost quite a bit of progress. I spent 20 minutes running around the island trying to find some way to get back to Giganto. I even resorted to looking up flying glitches, which there were quite a few of, but I could not replicate them. I was left no other choice but to load my old manual save. After reluctantly doing so and redoing everything I lost, I got back to Giganto, this time with max rings. Now, did you know performing a Psyloop spawned rings? Yeah, if you do a Psyloop without encasing an enemy within it, it just gives you rings. I had no idea this was possible at the time. Looking through old footage, I did do it a couple times before, but it was such a rare unintentional occurrence, I guess I didn't register it was happening. This whole fiasco could have been avoided if I just knew to Psyloop a bunch to get to max rings. I guess I have no one to blame other than myself, but this was a major oversight on Sega's part. Did none of the playtesters fail the fight or something? Did no one at Sega think players would want to go back to the main area to prepare? It's whatever. Minor setback, I redid everything that was lost, it's all in the past. So, what's up with the Giganto fight? Well, it's great. If you ignore the instances where you can awkwardly clip into Giganto, it's a fun time. Mindless button mashing with Sonic summoning giant versions of his fists and feet to beat the crap out of Giganto, quick time events, super flashy scenes that play after parrying. It's not super involved, but it doesn't have to be. And that music is amazing. Would you expect anything less from a Sonic game? After beating Giganto, we move on to the next island. As Sonic enters it, laser beams are fired, and he's hit by one. He reverts to his normal form and the Chaos Emeralds scatter. I get they had to come up with a way to lose them so you could get them again, but a laser? That's the best they could come up with? You're telling me Sonic wasn't fast enough to avoid that? What was in that laser anyway? Didn't seem nearly as deadly as Giganto's Mouth Blast, which Sonic easily flicked away. Anyway, now we're on Ares Island. The friend we free this time is Knuckles. Why is he here? Well, he says he was investigating some ruins and got trapped. Like Amy, you need to collect memory tokens to free him and unlock cutscenes, except they're red medals this time. You'll eventually be greeted by Sage again, as well as the titan of this island, the Wyvern, and you'll go through this sequence where you run away from it, avoiding a bunch of its missiles. I get the only reason the Wyvern attacked was because Sage had some influence over it, but does that mean it's docile the rest of the time? It's constantly flying around the island, sometimes directly above me, but it acts like Sonic doesn't even exist. The enemies on this island are more unique than the ones on Kronos, but I wouldn't say that makes them any better. We have those slightly more intelligent grunts I mentioned earlier, the ones with those annoying shields. There's a spring enemy, which provides no challenge whatsoever. Homing attack it, get sent up, do a ground pound, and it's dead. I literally never saw how these guys even attacked. There was definitely some missed potential here. So many of these spring enemies are just placed in flat, barren areas. They could have let players use them to reach places with higher elevation. Take this clip for example. I bounced off the enemy and managed to reach an obstacle course that happened to be directly above me. That was cool, and I initially thought it was intentional, but then I saw the spring I was supposed to jump off right next to the enemy. I guess they're obligated to have a spring there since a player could easily kill the enemy without realizing it's needed to reach a higher platform, but I don't know. These enemies would have been more welcome near the steeper terrain Sonic is incapable of running up. We also have these floating guys. When they see you, they unload a row of balloons you have to homing attack to reach it. The challenge here is to avoid hitting the bombs mixed in with the balloons on your way up. I don't really like this enemy. The only reason you'd ever hit the bombs is because of the homing attack reticle unintentionally locking onto them. You don't really have any control over the reticle, so you have to move the camera till it eventually decides to lock onto something else, and I just don't like that. There are also these UFO enemies. If you get caught by them, they steal a Chaos Emerald if you have one and run off with it, conveniently leaving a grindable trail behind themselves. Land on its head, stomp it, and it'll drop the emerald. I'm curious as to what happens if you just let it go. Better yet, what if you save and quit the game after losing the emerald? Will that one enemy still have it? It's totally possible to forget where these enemies are, so I wouldn't be surprised if the game just gives the emerald back as if you never lost it after reloading the game. Finally, we have these sniper enemies. When you're not directly next to them, they'll lock onto you and eventually fire a little laser blast. They're pushovers once you start hitting them, as they'll shield themselves for a time before eventually giving out and allowing you to deal damage. For mini-bosses, we have sumos, tanks, striders, and sharks. When you approach a sumo, it'll summon what's essentially an octagonal boxing ring with those rope fences. He's initially impervious to your attacks. What you have to do is slingshot yourself off the ropes into the sumo. This will knock him back a bit, and you need to push him into the segments of the fence that are electrified. Once you've done that, he'll be in a weakened state, allowing you to deal damage. If you bounce yourself off multiple segments before hitting the sumo, the amount he's sent back increases. Tanks are these turtle-like robots that form a twister, pulling you in with it. You're sent into the air and have to homing attack the tank in multiple spots whilst avoiding the fumes propelling it. Once you've done that enough times, the twister will dissipate and you both fall back to ground. From there, you can dish out some damage before the whole thing repeats. Striders. Man, I don't like striders. They're super tall, but you spend the whole fight at the bottom of them because that's where their weak point is. Its head is surrounded by these 3 circular rails you have to grind on. In order to reach them, you must first grind on these smaller rails. Traveling across one in its entirety will send you up to the next one, and eventually the main 3 rails. It's just an awkward concept. How does grinding along the entire rail put you at the center and propel you to the next one? Why does grinding on the 3 main rails grant you access to the Strider's weak point? In the first phase, the Strider shoots this easy-to-avoid laser on the rail you're currently on, but in the second phase, it shoots these green, pink, and orange fireballs. The orange ones are by far the most annoying. They switch rails frequently, and it's sometimes hard to tell if they even switched at all. The first time I fought a Strider, I got lucky and killed it on my first try, but the second encounter took me 7 tries to beat, and every failure was due to that stupid orange fireball. I may not have liked Strider, but Shark is the worst mini-boss on Ares Island. You latch onto its tail, and are given a bunch of QuickTime events where you have to hold the left analog stick down in a particular direction. It's so monotonous and dragged out. The fight's pretty much just waiting for the shark to let you homing attack its body so you can actually damage it. What's even worse is that I couldn't seem to one-cycle it. Even if the shark's health bar was literally empty, he would act like he wasn't dead and force me to go through another set of QuickTime events. Sometimes Sonic will stop dead in his tracks to monologue for a bit. It only happens occasionally, so it's not super intrusive. I only take issue with how precise the trigger for these events are. Back on Kronos Island, I had circled this Eggman ship several times before I walked into the trigger, where Sonic acted like he was seeing the ship for the first time. Same thing happened here on Ares Island. Sonic acted like he had just encountered this wall with a hole in it, even though I had him running along the edges of the hole like an hour earlier. Sonic ceasing his movement during a monologue is actually an option in the settings you can toggle off, making these occasional occurrences even less intrusive. Speaking of settings, there's also an option to turn off the training scene the game puts you in when loading in and out of cyberspace levels. I found it annoying when I first started the game, but eventually got used to it. Nice to know there was an option to turn it off. There are also a bunch of these movement sliders. You can change Sonic's starting speed, initial boost speed, turning speed, boost turning speed, top speed, steering sensitivity, acceleration, and bounce height. I guess it's cool to see they make Sonic's movement so customizable, but it's bizarre. It just doesn't feel like something you should allow the player to change on a whim. I can understand something like steering sensitivity, but none of these other things. That's like if a Mega Man game had an option to change how fast you could shoot, or if a Mario game had an option to change how floaty his jump is. So far we've seen a lot of large, floating structures on these islands. It's clear those Chaos-like people we see in those flashback cutscenes built them. I guess that explains why these random obstacle courses exist, but it still doesn't work. Did they travel around the islands by rail grinding, ziplining, wall running, and launching themselves off ramps and springs? Also, if the ancients made them, why do some of them have Eggman bumpers? One particular issue people had with Sonic Frontiers when gameplay was first revealed was pop-in. It's obviously still present in the final release, but it's not bad. I barely noticed it on Kronos Island unless I paid really close attention to my surroundings. On Ares Island, it was a little more noticeable. This instance in particular was kind of annoying. There was a memory token off the island, but the obstacle course for it was out of render distance. I had to make a leap of faith because I didn't feel like looking for the spring that was meant to propel me to it. It wasn't really a big deal though. In general, the pop-in is honestly a non-issue. Because you're such a fast character, you'd expect to run into stuff because it doesn't render fast enough, but I never encountered anything like that. Any game ships with a fair share of bugs. Sonic Frontiers is no different. Why did I get stuck in place there for a second? Why did I fall through the rail here? Why did I run off the platform when I was supposed to be locked in 2D mode? How did I survive that? Those are all just minor bugs though. Nothing can beat that fast travel glitch I experienced back on Kronos Island. After collecting 6 Chaos Emeralds and viewing enough cutscenes with Knuckles, you unlock the final puzzle of Ares Island, except it's not really a puzzle. While Kronos Island had that stupid laser thing that genuinely gave me a hard time, Ares Island has this crane game where you have to pick up colored balls and drop them in the corresponding spots. Picking these balls up requires your positioning to be exact, otherwise they'll fall off. Why do I have to be so precise when picking them up, but the game automatically lines it up for me when placing them down? Anyway, once that's done, you can finally confront the Wyvern. Similar to the previous Titan fight, the last emerald is located on top of its head. Unlike Giganto, the Wyvern really makes you work for that final emerald. You have to run up this tower, run along these red paths the Wyvern produces, avoiding occasional energy blasts like the Squid mini-boss, and homing attack these spinning lasers to get to other paths. It was quite the spectacle, but that doesn't compare to what ensues after getting that last emerald. It's the coolest fight in the game hands down. Flying around the map you just spent hours exploring in a matter of minutes, avoiding the onslaught of missiles and laser rings, Sonic chucking the Wyvern into a mountain like it's nothing, balling up all those missiles at super speed and kicking it into the Wyvern's face, guiding more of its own missiles into its mouth to blow it up. It's insane. Definitely my favorite moment in this game. Unfortunately, the fight ends and we have to move on. As we reach the next island, Sonic, once again, gets hit with the laser and loses the Chaos Emeralds. Now we're on Chaos Island, a volcanic-themed location. Watch out for lava. The friend we save this time is, you guessed it, Tails. Back when we released Amy and Knuckles from their capsules, some cyberspace gunk went into Sonic's arm. It seemed to sting, but Sonic was relatively fine. However, that was only the beginning of this cyberspace corruption predicament. After freeing Tails, Sonic's hit with the larger dose, and we see it really start to affect him. His idle animation changes to him holding his head, he's more sluggish in later cutscenes, and Sage also says he's pretty much dead and there's nothing to stop it. Well, Sonic can't just die. Last time he did, he nearly took the franchise down with him, so we'll just have to see how this cyberspace corruption gets dealt with later. By this point, you should have the formula down. Do basic challenges to fill up the map, get keys from cyberspace levels to get Chaos Emeralds, find Cocoa and Seeds along the way to level up your stats, and get more memory tokens to talk to Tails at other locations. The grunts on Chaos Island are like the ones from Ares, but they now have the ability to block. When this happens, you can dodge left or right to get behind them for a counterattack. They can also summon a ring of spikes to surround themselves. There's also this eagle enemy. I had no idea how to fight it at first. You can't homing attack nor punch it. What you're supposed to do is parry its laser, which will deflect it back into the eagle. It'll swoop in to hit you, then you'll be able to homing attack, but it still isn't dead. Instead of damaging the enemy, you'll cling to it like one of those swing bars. Press the button at the right time, and you'll get on top of the eagle. What's cool is you can actually control it when you've mounted it, but I never really messed around with this functionality and usually just killed the eagle immediately. You can tell Sonic Team were starting to run out of steam at this point because those two are literally the only enemies on the island. This is also reflected in the mini-bosses. You have Spider, which launches you into the air, making you go through glowing rings to remove the metal plating protecting its weak point. There's also Fortress, an airship that drops a few bombs before having you chase it down through a bunch of rail grinding. For such a cool looking enemy, it's one of the most boring mini-bosses in the game. Just hopping between rails a bunch isn't engaging, and once you reach its weak point, it doesn't even try to defend itself. Anyway, Spider and Fortress are unique, but Chaos Island also has mini-bosses like Shinobi, a recolor of the ninjas from Kronos Island. I demolished the first and only one I fought, so I never got to see if it did anything new. There are also excavators, recolors of the tower mini-boss. The only difference I could see is they shoot their projectiles in bursts of 3 instead of just one at a time. They even bring back squids, but they aren't named differently, nor recolored, they just straight up copy-pasted them. After getting the first emerald, the next titan shows up, the Knight. Without all the emeralds, we have no choice but to run away from it. Similar to how we avoided an onslaught of missiles with the Wyvern, we run along the path of a squid while avoiding the Knight's spinning shield. I like how the squid was just patiently waiting for Sonic to hop on in the cutscene. After some exploring, you'll eventually encounter one of those Death Egg robots from Sonic Forces, except it's pretty beaten up. I was honestly a little bummed when I saw it. Forces was a complete embarrassment, and I honestly hoped for it to be retconned at some point. Having this Death Egg robot here means that probably won't happen. It's kind of like Crisis City being in Sonic Generations. Anyway, the Death Egg robot is really just here to open a path leading to the Red Chaos Emerald, which is on a piece of land detached from the rest of the island. How do we activate the robot? Well, by playing a space shooter on the computer next to it. The minigame reminds me of Ikaruga, with the whole switching between two colors and the energy blast that homes in on enemies. Aside from the Death Egg robot, we do get another nod to Forces in a cutscene where Tails feels bad for being useless when Infinite showed up. In fact, the game makes quite a few callbacks to previous Sonic games up to this point, like Knuckles having a flashback that's literally just a still frame from the Sonic 3 intro, Sonic bringing up a couple of Tails' past feats, like him stopping Eggman back in Adventure 1, the Deadly Six in Lost World, and helping Sonic get out of prison in Adventure 2, Tails comparing the power of something we see in a flashback to Dark Gaia from Unleashed, Sage bringing up the Arc from Adventure 2, and Neo Metal Sonic from Heroes in a conversation with Eggman. I also remember Sonic bringing up the Mystic Ruins and Tikal from Adventure 1 at some point. It was cool to hear these characters name drop things from previous games and knowing exactly what they were referring to, like I was being rewarded for being a Sonic fan all these years. About halfway into Chaos Island is when I started to get quite immersed in the gameplay. I found myself running non-stop all around the island at top speeds to get all the Chaos Emeralds, memory tokens, cyberspace portals, challenges, and cutscenes. I was genuinely having a good time just running around completing the map, with nothing else on my mind. I even traveled on those white rails quite a bit. Though uneventful, they were honestly quite satisfying to travel on. Jumping off them at the right angle just after boosting can send you flying too. Now that's cool. The game definitely could have used more moments like that, except maybe without needing rails to achieve similar movement. It's around this time that Sage begins warming up to Sonic. At first, she saw him as an enemy because of Eggman, but the longer she stalked Sonic, the more she began to notice how selfless and kind he truly is. She's quite moved by this one particular conversation between Sonic and Tails. It conveyed their sibling-like bond, and Sage comes to realize deep down she longs for a similar familial relationship with Eggman, her creator. We even get a set of old Eggman-Sage cutscenes in a sepia tone, which further emphasizes her desire for the father-daughter relationship. With this revelation, Sage's coloration begins to flicker between black-red and white-blue, indicating inner conflict. She knows Sonic is a good person and realizes there's no reason to eliminate him, but part of her likely still wants to for Eggman, knowing that it would earn his affection, further progressing that father-daughter bond she desires. Anyway, once you've viewed enough cutscenes and gotten 6 emeralds, the final challenge of Chaos Island unlocks: a pinball game. Definitely wasn't expecting something like that, and clearly neither was Sonic. It was fun to play through, but when is pinball ever unfun? Oh, right. After playing enough, the volcano on the island somehow erupts, revealing the knight and its arena. Before you can climb up the knight, you have to wait for him to stop awkwardly spinning around like a maniac, while avoiding these rows of spikes he spawns. Eventually, he'll detach his arm and try to hit you with it. Successfully avoiding it allows you to grind along these rails to reach the knight's upper torso, where you can then climb the rest of the way. Get the emerald, and you're in for another pretty cool fight. The most bizarre thing about the fight is the scene that plays when the knight throws the shield. He launches it straight towards the edge of the pit. Then it cuts to the shield suddenly being farther back. Then in the final shot, it travels upward, out of the crater. Also, how does Sonic steer the shield? When the knight's low enough, the shield begins to bounce around the arena on its own. It honestly took me a while to realize I had to parry it into the knight. First I tried just ignoring it to focus on the boss, but the dude just kept running away from me. Then I thought I had to catch the shield in a Psyloop, but that didn't do anything. I can't believe the Psyloop rule actually didn't work for once. Overall, it was a pretty cool fight. Slicing the knight in half with his own sword was pretty sick. In the end though, I still prefer the Wyvern. After beating the knight, Sonic lands on Rhea Island, losing the Chaos Emeralds off camera. I guess getting shot by a laser a third time would have been silly. Anyway, Rhea Island is the top half of Kronos Island. I had a feeling we'd get here eventually. I remember looking at the map back on Kronos Island and wondering why there was so much detail on it when most of it was inaccessible. As for what we do on Rhea Island, it's quite different from the previous three. These 6 pillars emerge from the ground and we have to reach their tops to deactivate them. These things are crazy tall. It takes quite some time to get through the obstacle courses spiraling them, so try not to fall. Once you reach the top and deactivate a pillar, you're shown another one of those flashback cutscenes, except these are huge bombshells. Instead of those chaos-like creatures just being some ancient organisms native to this planet, they're actually aliens, and they had the Chaos Emeralds. That's right, the Chaos Emeralds were never native to Sonic's world, they came from space. The Master Emerald, on the other hand, is not from space. It's the reason the aliens were brought here in the first place, as its power drew them and the Chaos Emeralds to this planet. Other than those pillars, there's literally nothing else to do. Rhea Island is completely empty. There's no content, but it's littered with certain structures as if it was meant to have more. What's this one pit here for? Why is there a submerged city? Would you believe this is the 4th of the 5 islands we have to explore? Yeah, what a letdown. Here I thought there'd be 5 completely unique, jam-packed islands for me to run around in. I'm led to believe the developers were running out of time, so they decided to split Kronos Island, making it a smaller starting area, scrapped whatever Rhea Island was supposed to be, and just made it the top half of Kronos Island. After deactivating the final tower, the cyber corruption takes its toll on Sonic, pretty much killing him. Eggman, Tails, Knuckles, and Amy are brought back to the real world, and this ghostly voice starts talking about pretty much destroying the universe now that it's been freed thanks to Sonic. I guess I never mentioned this voice is with you from the start of the game. After escaping the first cyberspace level, it tells you to get the Chaos Emeralds and defeat the Titans. It's even the one that grants you the 3 special skills after freeing each friend. It also told you to deactivate the towers, so this whole time, Sonic was just helping free this ghostly entity, not knowing it was actually the bad guy. Once the voice is done talking, Tails says there's actually a way to save Sonic, forms a ring around him with Amy and Knuckles, they disappear, and Sonic is magically cured less than 3 minutes after falling victim to the corruption. Sage suggests an alliance with Sonic will help them stand a chance against their true enemy, to which Eggman reluctantly agrees to, and the hunt for the Chaos Emeralds begins one last time. That was terrible! The whole cyber corruption thing was handled so poorly. It was alright at first. Every time Sonic freed a friend, he'd get a dose of the cyber corruption, with each subsequent one worsening his condition. By the end of Chaos Island, Sonic was all sluggish, limping during cutscenes, yet in gameplay, Sonic was still running around and fighting just fine, smiling whenever he got keys from a cyberspace level, making that goofy laugh if he slid off terrain that was too steep, and so on. Now, I'm not complaining that Sonic should have controlled worse for the sake of the narrative, that would be stupid and everyone would hate it. I'm just saying they should have done more to emphasize Sonic's condition. They at least had him holding his head in his idle animation in Chaos Island and kneeling in Rhea Island, but if every one of his animations were updated to make him seem pained, that would have been cool. Maybe have some cyber corruption particles emanate from him, and add some red and black coloration to all the imagery and particles used in his attacks, like the sonic boom projectiles, spin slash, homing shot, and so on. I think all these surface level changes would have better driven home the fact that Sonic was slowly dying, getting worse as the game progressed. They even could have made a cutscene where the corruption got so bad that it forced the emeralds out of Sonic. That would have been a decent cutscene to explain how Sonic lost the emeralds when getting to Rhea Island. And the way Tails, Knuckles, and Amy cured him. It just doesn't make any sense. What did they do to rid Sonic of the corruption? Tails said,
"Those visions we saw. We can drive back the corruption and bring him back."
What the hell does that mean? What in those cutscenes explains how they can cure Sonic? None of them say, the power of friendship can stop cyber corruption. Actually, now that I think about it, they sent themselves back into cyberspace, reversing the corruption Sonic accumulated as a result of getting them out. That makes a little more sense, I guess, but it's still abrupt and anticlimactic. They just suddenly have the power to warp themselves into cyberspace somehow? From all the motivational stuff Tails was spewing, I genuinely thought I was going to be running around Rhea Island as Knuckles, Tails, and Amy to save Sonic. Considering they'll be releasing DLC with other playable characters later, it's possible this was their original plan. They just didn't have the time to get it into the base game. Now we're on Oranos Island, the final area of the game. How we got here isn't shown. We didn't have the Chaos Emeralds, so we clearly didn't fly here. Anyway, the environment is quite reminiscent of Kronos Island, further adding to the idea that the developers were running out of time. On this island, Sage plays the role of the friend. She's not trapped or anything, but you still have to collect memory tokens to unlock cutscenes with her to progress the story. While I'm on this topic, I forgot to mention you could talk to Sage in previous islands. Like Tails, Knuckles, and Amy, there were a few places you could find Sage to give her memory tokens and unlock cutscenes with her. I found it weird how you could pump these pink hearts, red medals, and yellow wrenches into her. If these are supposed to be specific to Amy, Knuckles, and Tails respectively, why does Sage get a cut of them? Why wouldn't she have her own special memory token? I guess since they just reused the hearts for Sage in Oranos Island, using Amy's memory token seems a little more fitting. But I don't know. Could they have at least made the hearts red to fit the character better? If anything, reusing the pink heart asset just makes Oranos seem even more like it was originally part of Kronos Island. Also, only a select few cutscenes are mandatory to progress the story, so it's entirely possible to miss some of them. They're still accessible even after progressing to other islands. Funny enough, I missed this one Sage cutscene in Kronos Island where Sonic introduces himself and Sage hates him. I was at the point where Sage had warmed up to Sonic in Chaos Island, so this interaction didn't make sense anymore. I get you were expected to view the cutscene at the beginning of the game, but it's weird something like that is still accessible so late. Viewing all the cutscenes is an achievement, so I guess it would have been unfair to get rid of old cutscenes players may have missed, making their only option to start a new playthrough. Although it's highly likely the developers just used part of an originally larger Kronos Island, Oranos is honestly my favorite area in the game. In a way, having Oranos Island look so similar to Kronos Island can be seen as Sonic being back where he started. The Chaos Emeralds have to be located once more, Sonic's friends sent themselves back into cyberspace to reverse his sickness, defeating the Titans merely helped in freeing the true antagonist. Did Sonic really make any progress since the start of his journey? You never really worry about Sonic or the state of the world in his games because you know he'll just triumph over evil in the end. However, Oranos Island manages to dispel that schema, at least for a moment. The thought of Sonic having accomplished nothing up to this point despite his efforts, knowing the journey is nearing its end, the frequently gloomy weather, the music that's equal parts depressing, foreboding, and dire, the cutscenes with Sage displaying Sonic's maturity and understanding of the current situation, the fact that his true enemy is this seemingly omnipotent entity, it all comes together to instill a sense of hopelessness in the player, and produces a genuinely serious moment. It's a refreshing tonal shift we rarely see done well in the Sonic franchise. They tried it in 06, it sucked. They tried it in Lost World, it sucked. They tried it way too many times in Sonic Forces, and they all really sucked. Basically, we often get serious moments in Sonic games that fall flat. The start of Oranos Island, however, was an exception. It worked well, and I commend Sega for managing to not entirely screw it up. Let's go over Oranos Island's enemies. Of course, you have the standard grunts. They don't seem to do anything different from the ones in Chaos Island though. Their only change is merely cosmetic. There are also these water bubble guys that are actually first introduced in Rhea Island, but they don't really do anything. Go inside them, then ground pound a couple times to kill it before you drown. Finally, we have these groups of hound-like robots. They form a circle around Sonic, then charge towards him one at a time. To actually attack them, you have to parry each one as they charge towards you. Once all have been stunned, you can retaliate. Let's talk about the mini-bosses. The caterpillar, which looks more like a tick than anything, forms these rails around itself that Sonic has to grind on while touching these blue orbs, which take out pieces of this little device floating above the caterpillar. Once one piece of that device remains, the final orb will appear above the caterpillar, and you'll have to homing attack these 2 yellow orbs to reach a spring that'll launch you into the final orb. Now that the caterpillar's main defenses are down, it'll scuttle away, firing some lasers and energy blasts. But when you start hitting its weak point, it just sits there, and none of its attacks can stop you. The most unique mini-boss in this game, the Ghost, has you go through an obstacle course to psyloop these totems, which act as its life force. While you do this, the Ghost places some curse on you, making you lose rings as you fight it. It'll also send out these tentacle things that impede movement. It's a pretty hectic fight with all that's going on. Gradually losing rings in particular makes the fight more tense, even though it really doesn't make much difference since you only lose 1 per second. The remaining mini-bosses of Oranos Island are merely reskins of older mini-bosses. Red Pillar and Silver Hammer are derivatives of Tower. I guess they have new attacks, but the fights work the exact same way, so can you really say these are new? Also, Red Pillar? Really? And I thought Tower was a dumb name. We also have the Kunoichi and Master Ninja, which are, as you may have guessed, ninja clones. They're a little tougher than their predecessor and have some new moves obviously, but again, it's pretty much the same fight. You know, we're on the last island, and I haven't talked about this yet, so I might as well do it now. On every island, you can find a special purple cyberspace portal. Rather than send you to a lame cyberspace level, you're instead sent to a pond with none other than Big the Cat. This caught me quite off guard initially. I really wasn't expecting it. When you first meet Big, he asks if you want to fish, lending you a rod. Sonic basically says sure, responding with,
I guess it wouldn't hurt to detense for a second.
It kind of bugged me. Like most people, I encountered Big while on Kronos Island, you know, the starting area. Around that time, there were at least 2 occasions where Sonic was impatient with Amy on her quest to help some Coco out.
I would think we've got more pressing issues, but again, who am I to argue? We still haven't found Tails. We've been wrangling children and taking detours the whole way.
Fishing is quite simple. Cast your line, press a button when the float sinks, then press again when the growing ripple is within the red ring. The size of the red ring depends on the rarity of your catch. It's infinitely less stressful than Big's fishing from Adventure 1. In order to continue fishing, you must pay Big with these purple tokens you'll occasionally come across throughout the islands. You can find quite a few throughout the world, but the bulk of your tokens will come from Starfall events, which I'm only now realizing I never mentioned before. I guess I'll get them out of the way too. Once every few nights, a meteor shower will occur. When this happens, all enemies and mini-bosses you defeated respawn. It's basically like a blood moon from Breath of the Wild. On top of that, star pieces fall onto the islands which you can collect. Doing so will activate the slot machine that shows up at the top of the screen. It's a little intrusive, to be honest. I'd initially only focus on collecting star pieces when Starfall events happened, but I eventually stopped caring because I had enough tokens and wanted to continue whatever I was doing. In those instances, the slot machine would really obscure my view. Take this for example. I can barely see what's ahead of me. No matter what the result is on the slot machine, you'll always get some amount of tokens. If all 3 slots are matching, however, you could easily get hundreds of tokens in one session. There are quite a variety of things to catch in Big's fishing game. Fish, crustaceans, reptiles, trash, a silver acorn for some reason, classic Sonic items, and so on. You can also occasionally fish out treasure chests that contain these golden tickets. Sometimes they'll even contain one of those attribute seeds. Whenever you catch something, you're rewarded these fish tokens. The amount is dependent on the rarity of your catch. You can use these, as well as the tickets, to buy certain items from Big's shop. You know how I said playing the cyberspace levels is kind of a requirement? That was a lie. Big actually sells vault keys at his shop. In fact, he also sells memory tokens, seeds, and cocoa, so you could probably beat the entire game by literally just fishing the entire time. I never really bought any of these until I reached Aranos Island, so I guess that's my excuse for bringing up this whole aspect of the game so late. Also, be sure to lower the game's volume when you buy a bunch of stuff from Big in one go. The most unique things Big sells are Eggman's voice logs. It's kind of a weird place to have these. Why would Big of all people have them? Anyway, there's not much to them. Just these statements from Eggman detailing his findings throughout his entrapment in cyberspace. He mentions Sage's development, makes a couple references to previous Sonic titles, confirms the aliens are ancestors of Chaos, and so on. Overall, Big's fishing game was honestly quite engaging. I think it was a good addition to this game. One very disappointing thing about Aranos Island is when you get the 4th Chaos Emerald, the music changes to the Kronos Island theme. It has to be a bug. Nothing like this happens anywhere else in the game. The original music really fit the endgame, and they screwed up the tension it brought with this abrupt swap. When you get the 6 emeralds, rather than getting the final one from a Titan, Eggman gives it to you. Makes you wonder where he found it. It's funny how Eggman said Sonic wouldn't be fast enough to get all the emeralds back on Rhea Island, yet here's Eggman with only one of them. Anyway, with the final emerald, you transform into Super Sonic and face the final Titan, Supreme.
I'm here, reaching far across these new frontiers. With my life, fight this fear. In my hands, I hold the ones I love. Walk forward through the cold tide.
To actually attack Supreme, you have to destroy one of the drones he summons. If you go straight to Supreme beforehand, which you most likely will do by accident, you'll be launched away. After destroying a drone, Supreme will fire some energy blasts, which you have to parry. Once that's done, you can finally attack him. This was a super disappointing fight. I guess maxing out all my stats made it too easy. Just look how I melt his health bar when using Cross Slash. The music is also not that good, especially compared to the last 3 Titans. When the fight's over, the unnamed antagonist oozes out of the Titan and floats up to space. Sage takes control of Supreme, then she and Sonic head after it. If you found the Supreme fight anticlimactic, get ready for this.
Is that it?
The end? It's literally just a moon. And the fight itself? Non-existent. It's just pressing a button at the right time a couple times so Sonic gains enough speed to pierce the giant rock. If you feel like you missed out on something, then you'd be right. The true final fight against the end is actually locked behind hard mode. If they felt the need to hide this fight behind another difficulty level, it has to be a crazy final boss, right? Nope, it's literally Ikaruga. I'm at a loss for words, honestly. What were they thinking? Once the boss's health is low enough, we go through the sequence where Sonic pierces the end again. That doesn't finish it off though. It charges up one more attack, and Sage sacrifices herself to completely take it out. Sonic gets back to land, and Tails, Knuckles, and Amy are there to welcome him. Eggman's here too, but he mourns the loss of Sage.
I wonder if cream and sticks are free.
After the credits, we get this scene of Eggman going through a computer, somehow managing to establish a connection with Sage, who I guess isn't really dead. I wonder what'll come of that. Now that we beat the game, what all is there to do in the post-game? Well, absolutely nothing. I guess you could max out your stats, catch all fish, complete any cyberspace levels you may have skipped, but that's all stuff you can do before beating the game. I personally like to do everything possible in a game before beating it. So, there was legitimately no reason for me to play anymore. Actually, that's untrue. I still needed to get the Platinum Trophy, and I was only missing one more achievement. It was the Do the Phantom Rush 50 times trophy, which amazed me. You're telling me, after 30 hours of playing Sonic Frontiers, I didn't do that attack 50 times? So, I jumped back into the game, punched an Asura's leg a few times, and got the trophy after 3 Phantom Rushes. That means I only performed that move 47 times total throughout the entire game, which I find quite interesting. Anyway, now that I had the Platinum, there really was nothing left. An arcade mode is unlocked for beating the game, but it's literally just a time attack mode for the cyberspace levels. Try to beat them as fast as you can, because Sega sure as hell knows that's the only way you can draw any amount of enjoyment out of them. Why is this the only thing unlocked for beating the game? I would have taken a boss rush mode over this. Those fights were genuinely enjoyable to play through. Halfway into Oranos Island, I was hit with a sad realization. Sonic Frontiers was supposed to be the Sonic game to astonish everyone, to show what modern Sonic was truly capable of, to show that Sega had some competence. Unfortunately, it didn't fully deliver. Although I do like the game and enjoyed most of it, I have to admit it's still flawed. It does quite a few things right, but it does a lot of wrong too. I knew this game wasn't perfect from the start, but I really wanted it to be. It has all these dumb, haphazardly placed obstacle courses that are super automated, the cyberspace levels are bad because it's just the boost formula, and I swear some are literally ripped from previous Sonic games. The cyberspace corruption thing was handled horribly, those challenges littered throughout the game are insultingly simple, leveling up your speed and ring count is ridiculously slow. Although I thought combat was okay, it does get a little monotonous after a while. Areas can often feel empty, development was clearly rushed near the end, leading to rehashed enemies and a less than satisfying finale, the freaking birds fly faster than Sonic runs. Essentially, the game has many flaws. Because of this, it's not going to be the one Sonic game everyone can agree is good. Of course, there's no such thing as a game everyone likes, but I was really hoping this would be the Sonic game a good majority of people would love, even the ultra-critical ones. With the number of objectively bad things in this game though, that was obviously not going to happen. And as all these negative thoughts rushed through my head, that one part of the Oranos theme would play, and I'd suddenly find myself tearing up. The game isn't bad. It really isn't. I had a good time playing it. It has its issues, yes, but it did some good too. Sonic, though not heavily momentum-based like I wanted, felt surprisingly good to control in the open world, especially compared to all the previous 3D Sonics. Although there isn't much depth to the islands, they were satisfying to run around in. The boost formula, though still here, finally took a back seat. The major boss fights were really cool. The narrative was actually good for a change. Aside from the disappointing result of the cyber corruption, the general story and characters were pretty well written. Sonic was more mature, Tails grew up, Amy wasn't overly obsessed with Sonic like she usually is, Knuckles wasn't a moron, Eggman wasn't a goofball, and Sage was a decent antagonist. I loved all those sudden nods to previous Sonic games, even if they were just on-the-nose name drops. I feel it gave the characters more depth by showing there was history to them. The music is great too. It's actually not the only good thing about a Sonic game for once. I still think this game should have been delayed, especially since it's clear Sega was rushing things near the end of the game. However, what they ended up with was alright. I'll give them that. It was their first attempt at an open-world Sonic. They changed the formula after a long time, and it resulted in a fairly engaging experience with understandable flaws. They've now proven Sonic can be more than a poorly designed linear mess. We need to support Sega now more than ever, to assure them what they did was good for a change, and that all they need to do is focus on ironing out the flaws. A new chapter in the Sonic the Hedgehog franchise has begun, and we can only hope it gets better from here. If I had to rate Sonic Frontiers, I'd give it a 7 out of 10.